What's up, guys? We're here in downtown Charleston today to talk to you guys about the history, the sights and sounds, take a brief look into the neighborhood options here in Charleston, and also talk to you guys about some other living options in the greater Charleston area. I'm Trey Besant.
And I'm David Liebtrot of the Besant Group. Let's get started.
Let's first go into the history, and man, if these trees could talk. Charleston was discovered in 1670 by the English, where the local settlers named it Charlestown after their king at the time. They got to planning out the city immediately, hoping to avoid the narrow, twisting streets of England at the time, becoming the first American city to be planned out in a grid style with straighter, broader streets for easier and safer travel. Additionally, the peninsula of downtown Charleston became a popular seaport for both importing and exporting, with its many wharves along East Bay Street. In its infancy, it was dubbed Little London after becoming one of the most critical ports along the East Coast, leading to an economic boom in the area in the 1740s. The philosophy of early Charlestown was based on religious tolerance and religious freedom, as they believed it would increase the city's numbers and profitability. The openness towards religion brought French Huguenots, Baptists, known then as Anabaptists, Congregationalists, and Presbyterians. Because of its origins of religious diversity, Charleston became known as the Holy City. A lot of change happened over the next couple hundred years, between the Revolutionary War ending the quote-unquote golden age of the city, being taken over by the British, and later the Civil War, which the first shots were said to be fired from a local fort called Fort Sumter. Aside from the change brought on by man, the city bestowed many natural disasters, including some very unfortunate fires and a huge earthquake in 1886, which actually changed the structure of many buildings, adding iron rods through them to protect the foundation of their architecture. In the 1920s, there began efforts to preserve the charm of Charleston's architecture, and by the 1940s, there were plans in place to adapt many of the old buildings to retain their charm, distinction, and tradition. With a rich 300-year history, Charleston today is one of America's most beautifully preserved architectural and historical treasures, being described by many as a living museum. The perseverance of the city's rich history is a testament to why it's thriving so well in modern day.
Now let's talk about some of the many things there are to do right here in downtown Charleston, such as the horse and carriage tours, ghost tours, touring the old jail where the infamous Blackbeard was jailed, by the way. There's many historical landmarks here, like White Point Gardens at the southernmost tip of Charleston, where it has a ton of history. And that's also where we were at the beginning of the video. It's a perfect spot to relax in the shade on a hot day, just like today. And just north of there, there's Rainbow Row, with 280-plus-year-old pastel-colored homes right there on East Bay Street. Then you have Waterfront Park with Palmetto Line Paths and the iconic Pineapple Fountain, where you'll often see families playing in the summer, and a nice dock to go out along the waterfront. Another must-see is the Charleston City Market, one of the oldest markets in the U.S. and currently only open 364 days of the year, and unfortunately closed on Christmas for all you last-minute shoppers. If you're looking for a fun day out, there's usually something going on at Marion Square. They have events there throughout the year, a farmer's market on the weekends, and a nice spot to just sit down, have a picnic when there's not something else going on. Diagonally from there, on the second Sunday of every month, they close down the intersection at Calhoun and King to southbound traffic to allow for what the city has deemed Second Sunday. The restaurants will bring tables out to the streets. Of course, the businesses have their doors open and there's vendors lined up along the street. It's a great outing with the family and a must-do if you're in town for a second Sunday. Other things to do would be attending a concert at Charleston Music Hall, a show at the Gilliard Center or a gala, the Charleston Aquarium, which has really nice exhibits. Then there are a ton of things to do within a half hour of here, like the beaches, historical landmarks, other recreational activities going on everywhere. It's hard to be bored around these parts. Now let's send it over to Trey to tell you some more.
and leave it to me to talk about the food. And if you guys are foodies, you have reached the haven. Now, with too many bars and restaurants to talk about in this video, I will mention to you guys a few of my favorites. Just make sure if you try to eat at a lot of these places, try to make reservations ahead of time. Sometimes about as much as 6 weeks or so out, especially for the peak dinner times as they fill up fast. You can check for available reservations on the app Resy. Now, some restaurants don't take reservations, but I'd recommend at least calling ahead just to make sure whether they do or don't. And they do accept walk-ins at a lot of these places. They try to accommodate the best they can, where typically you can get a bar seat or a high top somewhere in there. But if you do have a larger party, strongly recommend reservations. For breakfast and brunch, Miller's All Day is one of my favorites. Church and Union is another that I'll mention with some great brunch options. And Callie's Hot Little Biscuit for the grab and go breakfast or late night food. For cocktails, the Gin Joint and Door Bros are a few of my favorites. For lunch or dinner, Husk is amazing for Southern fare. Our Kitchen, now keep in mind this is one of those you're gonna have to make a reservation well in advance because it's very, very hard to get a table there. They mix up the menu for a 5-course meal every night, and I've never had anything there I didn't absolutely love. Worth going to if you can secure a spot. They have 2 locations, one in Charleston and one in West Ashley. Magnolia's is one of my staples to head to. You'll hear a lot about it as it's pretty popular, but it does live up to the hype. Probably my favorite, and another that's tough to get a reservation, but you can try up to 28 days in advance, is FIG, standing for Food is Good. Very straightforward, yet exquisite cuisine. And they're not open on Sundays or Mondays, just food for thought. Lastly, for seafood, you can't go wrong at Hank's, 167 Raw, or Anson's, but I can name about 20 more restaurants right off the top of my head, so you're gonna have options. And make sure to comment down below with any restaurant suggestions you guys may have. Now, let's talk about the living situation here on the peninsula. So it's broken down into 14 different neighborhoods. And we're gonna start with the most known that most people think of when they think of Charleston, and that is south of Broad, located south of Broad Street. This is the part of Charleston you'll see on TV where all the stately homes and mansions are. And this is where some great sightseeing is, including what we spoke about earlier with Rainbow Row and White Point Gardens. And you can tour some of the historic homes, my favorite being the 24,000 square foot Calhoun Mansion. Next is just north in the French Quarter, which got its name due to the preservation efforts in 1973, where back in the 1800s and early 1900s, there was a high concentration of French residents and merchants that lived here. It encompasses from the east at the Cooper River, west at Meeting Street, to the south at Broad Street, and the north at Hazel Street. A very walkable part of town. This is where the waterfront park is, the Charleston City Market, and the Provost Dungeon. The next is west of there, called Charleston Village, one of the earliest and largest neighborhoods in Charleston, encompassing from Broad Street to Calhoun Street and west of King Street. It's home to one of the oldest and prettiest college campuses you'll ever see, and I'm proud to say I'm an alumni of said institute, and that is the College of Charleston. Also worth visiting on that side of town when you're checking out the various real estate is Colonial Lake for a nice view to walk or bike around. Next is the King Street Historic District, a small area just south of where King meets Calhoun Street, where the shopping and many dining options are. And next up are the boroughs. We're gonna break these down a bit, but this is where the gist of the residential is here in Charleston, where you have Anson Borough, which is located along the Charleston Harbor, made up of mainly condos and not many single family homes here, but it is a very walkable part of town. This is where the restaurant Fig is that we spoke about, and also the aquarium. Next up, just west of there is Ragsboro, which is between Calhoun, King, and Mary Street. This is where Marion Square is, along with many restaurants and the Charleston Museum for you history buffs out there. Continuing west from there is Radcliffe Borough, which starts at King Street to the east out to Ashley Avenue to the west, where the southernmost point is Calhoun Street and the northernmost point is Morris Street. This side of town is very proximal to the colleges and to the universities, so you're gonna see a lot of multifamily and single family homes in this area. Then we move north to Elliott Borough and Cannon Borough, where this area has seen a lot of revitalization with many updated homes and some nice investment opportunities. This is where most of the short-term rentals or Airbnbs are located in Charleston. If that's of any interest, be sure to either contact contact us or check the local regulations because they are constantly changing. Being that that area also is close to the universities, you're also going to find that there's a lot of students in this section as well. So you will have a good many multiplexes and single family homes.
And I'll take it from here. Next, you have the east side. Here you'll have the old cigar factory, which was revitalized starting back in 2014 and now is the home to a few restaurants and an event venue. Also on this side of town is one of my favorite breweries, Palmetto Brewing. First licensed brewery in the state of South Carolina since the fall of the Prohibition. Reciprocating the east side is the west side. Just north of Crosstown on the west side of the peninsula, this is where a ton of growth has recently happened and continues to occur residentially and is also the site of our local minor league team, the River Dogs, owned by the one and only Bill Murray. Also on this side of town is Brittlebank Park, a spot with great views across the Ashley River and a nice park to take the kids and play. In February, you have Seawee. This spot is where Doc Dogs takes place and is a great time with the family. Another area near all the hustle and bustle of downtown is North Central, stretching from Congress Street to Mount Pleasant Street between Rutledge Avenue and I-26. You'll find mainly revived 19th and 20th century cottage-style homes mixed in with some restaurants and brewery options. And you don't want to miss some of the better barbecue you'll have here in town at Rodney Scott's Barbecue, which has been featured on Netflix. West of there is Hampton Terrace, only a handful of blocks west of Calhoun between Rutledge and Mary Murray Drive. This is where you have a quiet tree-lined street centered by the 60-acre Hampton Park, which is where we are right now. Also on this side of town, you have the Citadel, which is a military college of South Carolina. Just north of Hampton Park is Wagner Terrace with mainly 1920 to 1960s architecture, but you'll see many custom homes built since directly on the Ashley River. And the last neighborhood we'll talk about is North Morrison, nicknamed NoMo, where some of the peninsula's best restaurants, breweries call home. There are some houses, townhouses, and condos available, but not as many as in other parts of town. And now I'm gonna pass it off to Trey to tell you about all the important things you need to know before purchasing your first home here in Charleston.
And there are some very important factors to know before buying a home here on the peninsula. And the first thing we're going to talk about is flooding. It's known as the Low Country, so we are known for flooding. And there are certain areas and streets more likely to flood depending on elevation of the home and the location. Flood insurance can be required and is typically anywhere from a few $100s to a few $1,000s monthly. Now, flood insurance is usually very affordable for newer homes because they are elevated, but a lot of the homes here in Charleston have not been elevated. So it's important to get in touch with us or just talk to an insurance agent about what a specific property is going to cost in flood insurance. Now, Flood Zone X is the area least likely for flooding, and there is a small section of downtown Charleston where this is so. If you need to look at the current flood maps, you can go onto the FEMA website where they will have those available. The next thing we'll talk about is parking. Parking can be very limited depending on the property. Some have off-street parking spaces, but there are some where you might have to park on the street or pay for parking. If you own or rent in downtown, you can get a parking pass from the city of Charleston at a very affordable price. And the last thing we'll talk about are the taxes. So you have 4% and a 6% rate, where 4% is for a primary residence, 6% is for a secondary or investment property. To get an estimate, you'll want to visit the Charleston County Tax Estimator, where if you are buying it as a primary, you can put a 4% residence. If you are buying it as a secondary home or investment property, you want to type in that 6% residence. And keep in mind, these are just estimates, and as you know, with taxes, always subject to change, but this will give you a ballpark of what you're working with. Aside from downtown Charleston, let's talk about the suburbs of Charleston that make up the greater Charleston area that a lot of folks tend to move to. To live proximal to the beaches, there's Mount Pleasant, which is the closest to both Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island. The median home price in Mount Pleasant is in the mid 700s, and that does include condos and townhomes, so they can get significantly higher in price for most of the single family homes there. To be close to another of our popular beaches called Folly Beach, there's James Island with a median median home range in the low 600s. James Island is fairly small, but has a large mix of home styles from 70s ranches to modern custom waterfront homes. And the last beach that's within about a half hour from downtown is my personal favorite to visit, and my family and I do a staycation here a couple times a year, and that's at Kiowa Island Beach, where you have Johns Island, another Charleston suburb, just a few minutes from there. But I will say it's kind of a large island, so you can be anywhere from 5 minutes away to almost a half hour, just FYI. Median home range on Johns Island is in the mid 500s. There again, there's some options on the water and also some exclusive golf course communities up into the millions. Let's stray away from the beaches and talk about other popular suburbs. West Ashley is another one to consider with its proximity to Charleston, waterfront homes, established neighborhoods, and a popular restaurant and bar scene there too. The median price point in West Ashley is in the high 500s. For better price points, you can go further out in pretty much any direction besides south, of course. Up I-26, about a half hour away, is Summerville, one of the fastest growing towns in South Carolina. They've got a charming downtown area and some really nice communities. The median price point in Summerville is in the low 400s. If you're more of a lake person, Moncks Corner is about 50 minutes away from downtown and has a pretty cool lake named Lake Moultrie, a great place for fishing, water sports. And there in Moncks Corner is a nice little downtown area. Moncks Corner is another popular place that folks are tending to move to with a median price in the high 300,000s. And an honorable mention is actually one of my favorite places in all of Charleston, and that is Daniel Island, a 4,000 acre island tucked between the Wando and Cooper River, where you have many businesses, restaurants, recreation, and residentially some stately homes and waterfront homes. There also you'll find the Credit One Stadium, formerly the Volvo Car Stadium, and prior to that the Family Circle Cup. And it's also a popular spot for many events and concerts. So that wraps it up for today's video. Again, I'm Trey Besant.
And I'm David Liebtrot of the Besant Group.
And all of David's socials and contact info will be in the description. Give either of us a call for anything real estate in all of the Charleston area. We look forward to talking with you
and working with you.
We'll catch y'all on the next one.
Peace.